Welcome, welcome. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. If you are already here and ready to start, why not start by just popping into the chat where in the world you're from and what it looks like outside your window right now, as in what's the weather doing? We'll be starting in literally a couple of minutes. Amazing. So we've got a good spread of people around the UK. Welcome to colleagues that are joining from the US. We normally have a good spread of people from around the world. So we're going to give it another minute just to allow people to drop in and then we will get started.
Thing during the webinar thing.
Lee, could you spotlight me, please? And can you all go see the slides okay? If you can, give me a thumbs up. Amazing. So I think we've got as far across on the west as Tennessee, and the east it looks like we've got as far as Western Cape, South Africa. So welcome from far and wide. It's always fantastic to host these sessions, knowing that so many people turn up to have these open conversations. So we'll give it another 30 seconds and we're going to get started. Just before we do that, how many of you are here at one of our webinars for the very first time? Any newbies? Okay, great. So fantastic. So we've got Julie here for the first time. So those of you who've never been to one of our programs before, you are very, very welcome. It looks like we've got quite a few first timers. Amazing. So I will explain for the benefit of those that are joining for the first time how this works. I know it's called a webinar, but strictly speaking, it's not. For those of you that regularly join us, you'll know that actually it's more like a group discussion. And we can get anywhere between 105, 600 people that turn up. We're going to do our best to have an open conversation, an opportunity for us to all get involved, to share our thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and for us to learn and grow together. Today's session is called Finding Steady Ground, Mental Health in Times of Crisis, and this is to mark World Mental Health Day. So happy World Mental Health Day, everybody. We are here to discuss a topic that we don't often openly and freely discuss. And how many of you have noticed that your mental health has been impacted in times of crisis? And many of you may find that you're in a time of crisis now. The world is seemingly in a bit of a state of crisis. There are all kinds of challenges and disasters happening around in the world around us. And how many of you would agree that when there is a crisis, whether you're experiencing or is happening around you, it can have an impact on your mental health? How many of you would agree with that statement? Okay, so I've got lots of hands going up, many of you saying yes in the chat. And yeah, it's inevitable. Whether it's your crisis or someone else's crisis, it will have an impact. How many of you would like to learn how to find steady ground in a time of crisis? How many of you agree that when you're in a crisis, it feels like there's an earthquake going on and everything's shaking and nothing's steady? How many would like to be able to be more steady even in the most shakiest of grounds? Okay, great. And particularly as the way things are going, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but it could be that the world gets even more shaky than it is now. Particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, we've noticed that it feels like we're going from one dramatic crisis to another. Since COVID, it just feels like there's another challenge, another challenge. You don't get your head around the last one before we've got to deal with the next one. So I hope, I genuinely hope that things start to become more easeful and peaceful, but I don't know that. And all we can do is best equip ourselves to deal with whatever the world and life presents us. And that's, as I said, like this idea of finding steady ground even in the time of crisis is something that we're here to explore. But how many of you have not had had your mental health impacted in a time of crisis, and are not really that interested in learning about steady ground and just here out of curiosity? And if that's the case, that is okay. You are still very, very welcome. We don't all have to agree and see things the same way in order to be able to learn and grow together. So actually, I'm welcoming differences of opinion, different thoughts, different beliefs, because that's what community is. And really, my job with my colleague Lee give us a wave. Lee's my co-pilot today. Lee, give us a wave. Oh, I'm not sure she can hear me. Yeah, there we go. So she's my co-pilot. She's here to support today's session. So any questions or anything that you need, feel free to put that into the chat. She's here to support you in any way she can. And as I said, my job is to guide this discussion. So look at, well, what can we do? How can we better equip ourselves to cope, particularly with the world the way it is? Those you don't know, who are we? So I ran an organization called the Stress Management Society. We're an international non-profit organization I set up 22 years ago. Makes me sound and feel old saying that. And I set this organization up off the back of a first-hand experience where my mental health impact was impacted by a crisis I was going through in my own personal life. And the ground literally gave way underneath me, and the depths of which I got to the point where I had what's now described as a breakdown, and eventually got to the point where I didn't want to be here anymore and tried to end my own life. It was the recovery of that experience that allowed me to recognize my calling, my ikigai, so to speak, my reason for being, was to help other people that go through the same kind of thing. That's why I set this organization up. This isn't my job. This is very much my reason for being. And over the last 22 years, we've been really blessed and fortunate to be able to reach so many people. I think at the last count, more than 100 million people. We also do some consultancy and research work with our clients from around the world through our corporate arm, which is called International Wellbeing Insights. So yeah, oh, sorry guys, it seems like I'm having some technical issues, but as long as you can hear me, that's good. Hopefully it will sort itself out before we finish. Everything we do in our monthly webinars, all the resources we provide, all the support that we offer is only done so by the generosity of people like yourselves that attend these webinars and are able to make donations. We're not compelling you to, but if you can, it allows us to continue doing this work, to provide the resources and be able to support people as best we can. So there's a QR link, and we will send a link on how you can do that on a follow-up email. So as I said, any little that you can provide continues to support our ability to do this work. So how to use this session? It's not a webinar. Unfortunately, it was titled as a webinar, but that's just because we couldn't think of a way of describing this. It's actually an open discussion. So we're going to encourage you to put your cameras on rather than looking at initials on the screen, because at the moment I can only see myself and Lee. Let's have a conversation with real human beings, being able to see the whites of people's eyes, and it actually creates trust and safety. And it's really interesting that some of the challenges that we're experiencing around mental health at the moment are because we're becoming increasingly isolated. How many people would agree with that, by the way, that we're spending less and less time in social, when I say social interactions, face-to-face human interactions? Yeah, absolutely. Whether at work or even in our social lives, actually we're spending less and less time with real human beings. There is a direct consequence to that. I'm a Londoner, so I'm born and bred in London, in Great Britain. London last year won an award of being the loneliest city on the planet. I kid you not, 9 million of us that live here, yet it won the award of being the loneliest city on the planet. You are never alone, but how many of us experience the lack of meaningful connection with other human beings? The reasons we always encourage people to show up and be present and put your cameras on, so we can feel that sense of connection with each other. Even though you may not know the people on this call, that's how we create community, by showing up. I will ask questions. They are not rhetorical ones. Feel free to get involved. You can put a message in the chat. Lee will share some of those comments. But also, I'm going to encourage you to jump on the microphone. All you need to do is put your virtual hand up, and we'll allow you to share, because we want to hear from you. It's not just about my perspective. It's actually hearing from you as well. So feel free to ask your questions, share your experiences, disagree, seek clarification, whatever you need over the next 50 minutes or so. We're here to help and support you in the best way we can. Just a couple of ground rules to support that. Let's make the most of this time. We've got a huge subject and a tiny amount of time, so let's make the most of it. So be present rather than kind of watching this whilst you're working on a report in the background or eating your lunch or watching something on television. Actually be fully present. You're going to get much more value out of this session. So you can, if you can, limit any other distractions that's going to prevent you from being present to this session. What you put in will determine what you take out. So please do your 50%. Be open, honest, respectful. If someone shares something you don't agree with, that's okay. They're entitled to their opinion as you're entitled to yours. Have an open mind and an open heart to new ideas, new suggestions, new ways of doing things. Use I statements. So if you're making any statements, in my opinion, I think that rather than speaking on behalf of others. We ask that this is a safe space. So anything that's discussed and shared in this space of a personal nature, we ask you not to share that outside of this space. That being said, the session is being recorded because there's a lot of people that sign up and aren't able to attend live. So just making you aware of that. But the only people that have access to this are people that have registered and made a commitment to be a part of this program. The only caveat is if anything gets mentioned that impacts your safety or the safety of others, that's the only time we would break the rules of confidentiality. As mentioned, the session is being recorded. We will share the recording after the session. So if you want to pass it on to any friends or colleagues that might benefit from it, or if you missed bits of it or can't stay till the very end, you'll have the ability to catch up. Okay, so what do we want to explore today? How we can get stuck, particularly when things are challenging. There are crises, there's change, uncertainty. That can leave us feeling like we're on unsteady ground or stuck. We're going to explore what it means to find that stable ground when life feels unpredictable, how we can find that solidity, simple practical ways that we can start to regain kind of balance and that sense of groundedness, and how to move forward even in times of crisis with great clarity, calm and confidence. But as I said, this is a space for us to reflect, reset, discuss, explore, and support each other in raising awareness of how we can take action in a time where many of us need to find the opportunities to be more grounded. So what is a crisis? So crisis doesn't always make the headlines, and it's different for different people. Even the word crisis will mean different things for different people. So for you, what is a crisis? How would you describe a crisis? Before we look for a solution, I think we need to understand the nature of the challenge we're here to explore. That's an actual question. So who'd like to share, who'd like to jump on mic and share your thoughts around what is a crisis to you?
Crisis is for every person, it is a different scale, depending on their,
of course.
So crisis is the one who cannot manage the things which in the hands, something like that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Asha. What is it for you? What does a crisis mean for you? Because you're right, it's different for different people, but I'd be really curious to know, what does it mean for you?
For me, whenever I feel that I am unable to handle the situation with the resources available, sure, that is a crisis. Yeah.
So you can't handle the situation with the resources you have available. Great. I couldn't have put it better myself.
Yes. Yeah.
Lee, what do you have in the chat?
We've got a few responses. So Julie shared a life-changing event. Sarah says having no control. Eleanor similar, out of control. Daniel shared that, where you're unable to cope. Which Lindsay added to whatever's going on when I'm not in control. So a lot of stuff about how an individual feels and is able to like control things versus like being able to manage it or not. So that's what's coming up quite a bit in the chat.
And what I found interesting, based on Ashok's response and some of the things that Lee shared in the chat, it's not what actually is going on, it's your perception to what's going on. How many would agree with that, by the way? It's not what you're actually experiencing, it's how you feel about what you're experiencing. And yeah, absolutely. So how many of you have ever had what could be described as a crisis, but were able to cope, were able to find the ability to navigate it, to step up and be able to take whatever action is required? And if you're able to put your hand up to that, so I've seen Maureen, you've got your hand up. Would you like to share? So Anne, I've got a few of you got your hands up. I'd love to hear from you about crisis situations where you were able to step up and handle it. Any of you put your hand up? Feel free to jump in.
I is looking at your slide. I would the letter A sitting in the middle of it, I think makes all the difference. A crisis is something you can manage and deal perhaps where you don't feel overwhelmed, but the way you wrote the statement is a crisis for me.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you, Derek. I appreciate that. Anyone else like to share? Times where you've been able to step up and handle a crisis. Yeah, go for it, Stephen.
Yeah,
no
you're on.
mute.
I've never used
There you
Teams before. I usually use Zoom. So I've worked out how to turn my mic on. So for me, crisis is when your emotional intensity goes up beyond sort of 7, 8 out of 10 when you get in that fight or flight situation, and this stops working and your subconscious takes over, your automatic behaviours, default behaviours take over.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there are many examples that I'm sure that we can all relate to where something really minor's happened, like you spilt your coffee, or you got cut up on the way home from work in the car, and it becomes a crisis. You're feeling blinding, get really angry, and you lose the plot. Have you ever had an experience where, on the face of what's happened, is really irrelevant, insignificant, but it's caused a horrendous reaction? I see a few heads nodding. Well, it's definitely happened to me quite a few times. But on the flip side, how many of you have had a situation where something really challenging or dramatic happens? There's like a serious emergency, a real major crisis, and you're able to find the ability to navigate it, right? And I think this is very much talking to Stephen's point. It's not what's actually happened, it's the emotional reaction to what's happened. And I think this is basically what we need to explore. We do know how to find the tools to navigate a crisis because we've been able to do it in many situations that we faced, but also we've created crises in our own minds when there is actually not much to be concerned about. So this is rather than let's look at how we can affect what's happening outside of ourselves, because we didn't have control over that. You don't have control over what's happening outside of yourself. If there is a major disaster or a war or like some tragedy, you might not be able to control that. But what can you control? What do you always have full control over?
Under your influence, whichever, yeah.
What's under your influence, and what's always under your influence? Go for it, Mara.
I was just going to say your emotions. You could actually control your emotions. I believe that you can control your breathing. So you asked the question, how do you handle that crisis? What is it that you do, right? So for myself, I would say that I just try and step back, become grounded a little bit, breathe, and say, is this something that is in my control that I can handle at this moment or not? Is this something that I can change or not? And try and look at it in a different way so that it doesn't create those boiler points inside of me to become more stressful or more out of control. So I would think, for me, anything that could trigger a change in my thought, whether it be some calming music, breathing, a walk, just to clear my mind, because I know that that's there. And so now let me see how I can release it and possibly share some of the burden that's on me from those crises with someone else to try and help me through it.
Absolutely, Tamara. So it's very much, you cannot control what's happening outside of yourself, but you can absolutely control how you choose to react and respond to it, right? Because we could go into panic and overwhelm, or we could choose to take action in the ways that you just described. The story that I will share with you is something that happened several years ago. I believe it was in Belgium on a train. There was an individual, it turns out that after the fact that he was seriously mentally compromised, and he got onto a train that was traveling between, I believe, Brussels and the Netherlands. Don't quote me on the facts. Basically, he pulls out a gun and he starts screaming and he's about to start shooting. Now, in a situation like that, that would be something you would describe as a crisis, right? Most people on that train went into panic, overwhelmed, screaming. They're scared. Obviously, they would be, right? It's a normal reaction. There was 3 individuals that happened to be on holiday. They were on vacation, traveling around Europe, that were on that train that didn't go into crisis because they happened to be military service personnel that were off duty on holiday. They know how to deal with that situation. I believe that there were 3 young American gentlemen, and they basically went into, rather than crisis, they went into, well, I'm trained to deal with a situation like this. I know exactly what to do. And they handled it. And they overpowered this individual, managed to restrain him until the authorities arrived at the next station when the train pulled over. What was the difference there? Why did they not go into panic, overwhelm, and a strong emotional crisis? Because they're trained to deal with that. Does that make sense? That's literally their job, to deal with such situations. What I'm saying, it's inevitable. The world that we live in, you are going to face crisis. Are you going to be like the majority of people on that train when it happens? We don't know how to deal with it, so we're going to panic, overwhelm, and fear. Or are we going to be like those 3 young men who train themselves to cope with those situations? Yes, I appreciate for them it was their job. But what I'm saying is the lesson we can learn, we should all be training and preparing ourselves for crisis. And I genuinely hope we don't face them. But if it does happen, which sadly the world we live in is likely, at least you have the tools to be able to respond. Does that make sense? And the reason for me this conversation is so important today on World Mental Health Day is we are here to talk about a subject that actually is one of the biggest killers on the planet. What is the main cause of death for a man under the age of 50 in Western society?
Suicide.
It is. And sadly, it's now rapidly becoming the main cause of death for a 15 to 29-year-old on planet Earth. Interestingly, we were talking about service personnel in the US. 4 times as many military professionals die as a result of their own hand than of active combat. So the biggest killer for US military professionals is themselves. And that's true across many military organizations. The reason I'm suggesting we need to pay attention to this is we may be able to handle certain sort of external crises, but are we able to handle our own internal emotional crises? And that, for me, is really for what a crisis is. When we get to the point where the emotional experience we're having is so overwhelming, we can't cope anymore. So I appreciate you all being vulnerable to get involved with that. But where does real steadiness lie? We can't rebuild everything when you're having that kind of challenging experience, but we might be able to find a moment of peace. If there is a storm, the worst possible storm that you can think of, where is the most peaceful place to be in a storm? Famous phrase that many of you will have heard before.
The eye of the storm.
The eye of the storm. Thank you, Mo. So tell me, what does that mean to you, being in the eye of the storm? What does that look like from a practical perspective? Mo, I'd love to get your opinion. Obviously, you shared the quote. What does that mean to you when you hear "eye of the storm"?
Well, it's when some of the chaos stops, so you are in the centre able to observe clearly without being caught up in the storm that's going on around you.
Absolutely. So the storm is still there, and it's not like the storm's gone away, but you're in the middle of it rather than being impacted by it. Does that make sense? Now, whatever you are experiencing in your life, how can you find the eye of the storm? Because that's where we can find that moment of peace and clarity. Because if you then get sucked back in to the thick of it, hopefully you've got some perspective. Does that make sense? So what does that look like? You know, it's great as a metaphor. But what does that look like as a practical action? How can we find the eye of the storm to be able to find that moment of peace and clarity, that moment to be able to just essentially do what Tamara said, you know, just we find a few minutes to watch our breath, to meditate, go for a walk. That Tamara, what you said for me is very much finding the eye of the storm, right? It's like, this is happening, but I'm going to find a place where I can find the peace within to be able to deal with what's happening without. Does that make sense? What is your perspectives on this?
Giving yourself permission to stop, and with, you know, when we're in a crisis or when we're working hard, we keep going, and actually the hardest thing is just to stop and give yourself time
Absolutely.
to observe.
Absolutely. And I've seen a couple of comments in the chat. So Jane saying tune into inner self. Joe was talking about recognizing and addressing kind of your not just mental health problems, kind of your mental and emotional state rather than just soldiering on. Give yourself time to think. So Gemma, I'd love to kind of bring you in here. Would you like to expand on what you're saying? Because you're both saying sort of variations of the same thing. It's just recognize where you're at, being present, having moments of self-awareness. How do we do that? Because these are great examples. I'd just love to explore sort of the ways that we can do this.
I think it's knowing yourself. Sorry, it's just.
You go first, Gemma.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry. I think it's just knowing yourself and knowing what's normal and what good looks like for yourself. And for me, it was like, I mean, I put it further up in the chat, is that I knew if my mental well-being wasn't great, I quite often will drop a cup in my kitchen and it smashes because I've got a tile floor. And it's my reaction to that cup is a measure of how good or bad my mental well-being is at the moment. If I go, oh, well, I'll have to clean it up. But if I completely lose it and go, for God's sake, what, you know, and it's knowing yourself and knowing what's normal and what's right and whether or not you're well. And recently for me, it was, I knew it wasn't right. You know, I smashed a glass, I'd lose my temper. And actually, since having HRT, for example, I've totally come back to being myself, and it's made a real difference. And I'm able to cope with that. It's not a crisis, is it? But it's like it's just one of those, you know, those annoying things like when you get your cuff caught on a door handle. Like, it's how you react to those things, how you react to like road rage and people cutting you up and stuff. So it's just knowing yourself, isn't it? Really.
Absolutely. What about for you, Jane?
I think I was more going along the lines of just kind of a checking in with yourself. So obviously there's been a kind of a couple of times throughout my life, there's been situations that you could say were a bit of a crisis and stuff like that. But I think for me, in order to kind of cope with those situations, I had to like take a step back and just like revisit me and process it in my way so that I could then kind of help and support the person that was being affected by the crisis. The crisis wasn't happening to me, you know, through like ill health or whatever, but it was affecting me, excuse me, because it was like family. But I had to step back, think about, right, okay, I need to process this for myself, and then I can be then that supportive person. Whereas I think if I didn't take that time, then I could actually have just perhaps made the situation worse, or like, because I think for me, I'm very much, if there's a stressful situation, I'm like, right on it, give me it, I can deal with this. But for this situation, it was one thing after another, after another, after another. So I did have to be like that. I need to take a step back and just kind of just go into myself and be like that, right, what is happening here, and why am I feeling this way, and la la la, what do they need, what do I need, and then being like that, right, okay, I can deal with whatever it is that's happening.
Absolutely, Jane, and you're absolutely right. And that's the hardest thing to do in a moment of crisis, take a step back and tune into where am I? What do I need? What am I experiencing? How am I being impacted by this? You're absolutely right. Tina, go for it. Tina Kinney. Okay.
Neil, I was just going to add as well. I was going to add to the chat where we spoke about obviously having that confidence and training that, again, throughout my life, I had went and did like a mental health first aid training, like assistant stuff like that. And actually only within 2 weeks of doing that training, I actually came across, when I was driving home, a young man who was sitting on top of a railway bridge, and actually I helped him get down. But if that had happened 2 weeks before I went on that training, I would have panicked and not known what to do. So just having that training and confidence allowed me to not go into crisis and to deal with the situation in a calm, kind of a productive way, sort of a thing. So
amazing, Jane. And you kind of just pretty much highlighted what we were talking. Oh, sorry, Tina, give me a second. We'll come back to you just a second. Jane, what you just described there is a really great day-to-day example of what most soldiers experience. The vast majority of people, because they're not trained, they don't know what to do, and they'll go into panic and overwhelm. In the same way, if you're driving down the street and someone threatens to jump off a bridge, 99% of people don't know how to deal with that, so they go into panic and crisis, right? Because you've done the training, you were able to respond in the same way those trained military professionals were, to be able to deal with that situation and lead that crisis into a positive outcome, if that makes sense. And this is really why we all have a responsibility to ourselves and to those around us to find the ability to navigate crisis, because we are going to face them in our lives, and sadly the world we live in means that there seem to be more and more of these happening. So yeah, absolutely, go for it, Tina.
Yeah, what you just said is kind of what I was going to feed on. That is, it feels like decade here in America has been a rolling crisis, when, you know, it just feels like if you were to try to take a step back every time some bit of news or something happened that felt like a crisis, you would get nothing else done.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really important point.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
go ahead.
That's kind of the struggle that I have, is that it's hard to know what's even a crisis anymore, because it all feels like one.
Absolutely. And here's for me, the dangerous thing about going from one crisis to another. After a while, you feel exhausted. How many would agree with that? You get to the point where it's just like, oh, what, another thing? I can't deal with that. So you don't even react. And that for me is scarier than having a strong reaction. I was running a session for a group in the States, I think it was last year. And I always joke, based on the current trajectory, the next thing that will happen is aliens will attack, right? Because it's just the kind of script that we're living in right now. It feels like a very twisted episode of Black Mirror, right? So obviously the next funny thing that will happen is aliens will attack. And someone in the group said, well, you shouldn't joke about that, because at the time there was a US Senate committee hearing about declassifying all the information they've got on aliens and alien bodies. And I'm like, what? Am I actually living in some kind of Hollywood dystopian sci-fi vision? But actually that's real. That's not like a story, that's actually something that happened last year. So it's got to the point where, and a lot of people say, well, how can I react to that? Because I've got to worry about paying the rent and feeding my family and keeping my job down. So how can I react to something as outlandish as that when I'm trying to deal with a crisis in my own life? Does that make sense? So we've actually got to, for me, a scarier point where not a strong reaction, where you get no reaction. Because you kept people in a state of crisis for so long, they become numb. So how many can relate to that, by the way? You hear something else happening, you're like, I can't deal with this right now. Because I feel like that sometimes. I'm working mental health. So this is where, for me, the crux of today's conversation comes in. No matter what is going on, no matter how much the world is shaking, there is always something under your feet. What is always under your feet, no matter where you are? As long as you're on this planet, you might be elevated from it, but it's always there. Because if it's not there, then neither are we. And the slide has plenty of clues on there. It's an open book question.
The ground.
Oh, the
What should
ground.
we be
I just-
looking
yeah.
The ground.
The ground is under your feet.
Absolutely. But when we're in a state of crisis, we feel like the ground has been taken away from underneath us. We actually have phrases for this, right? It's like the ground's fallen away, the rug's been pulled. Does that make sense? And those phrases are that literally you kind of lost your ability to stand your ground. It's always there, but sometimes we forget to feel it. So what can we do to find that ground again, regardless of how much the world around us is shaking? And there are different ways that we can do this. And this is really what I want to spend a bit of time exploring today, because you can't necessarily change what's happening outside of you. We can't individually heal the world alone in one go, but we can choose how we show up in it. And are we showing up as a solution to the crisis, or are we showing up as part of the crisis? And that choice, that is kind of that sense of inner grounding. I feel connected, I feel solid. And this is interesting because this isn't actually a mental health technique. My first kind of exposure to the power of grounding was from martial arts. Anybody here practice martial arts? It doesn't need to be combative martial arts. It could be Tai Chi, Qigong, even yoga. Many forms of practice that involve you finding your strength. From that perspective, what happens to you when you're mentally and emotionally compromised? What happens to your ability to physically stand tall? For example, if I came up to you and you're strong in yourself, you're feeling grounded, and I push you, what would be the difference that if I pushed you and you're tired, you're stressed, you're overwhelmed, you're feeling like you're really shaky, what would be the difference between the two? And if we were physically in a room, I would actually do a demonstration and show you. But I'm just going to ask you to imagine, and you can kind of test this out, with the people around you. What would be the difference when you are solid within yourself, or when you're stressed, overwhelmed, can't cope, exhausted? And just as simple, I'm just going to gently nudge your shoulder. What would happen? What would be the difference between the two? Particularly for those martial artists in the room, I'm sure you've got some experience of doing this. What will be the difference?
Comfort.
Sorry? Stephen, go for it.
Yeah, I practice Tai Chi, and I used to practice more competitive martial arts in the past. But what you're saying is actually brings me to an NLP technique, neuro-linguistic programming, where if you have a negative thought and someone gives you that gentle push you're talking about physically, you tend not to be able to withstand it as much as when you're carrying a positive thought in your mind. You tend to be more solid and grounded, and you can resist that push. Certainly in martial arts, if you have a stance where your feet, to your opponent are sort of forward and back rather than side by side, you'll be a lot more solid, because that's the way your body resists things. I think the NLP analogy is probably the better one here.
And both are true. That when we're solid, it's harder to take you off your center. How many would agree with that? Because I'm solid in myself, and you come along and try and physically push me, I'm going to be able to stand my ground more than if I'm, oh my God, I'm stressed and I'm all floppy like a jelly bean. And this is really what I'm asking you to consider. You can react to the situation we experience in the world around us and feel completely ungrounded, and that would be understandable if that was the case. But it's our ability to find our solidity within means that we can react and respond to what's happening outside of us in a way that's more likely to lead us to a positive outcome. Does that make sense? And this is something that, as I said, you don't need to do years of research or take up a practice that's going to take a lifetime to master. Some of these things are so simple and easy. And a big part of this is your body will react to how your mind perceives it's experiencing a situation. Does that make sense? Even saying, like, for example, in that situation with Stephen, I come up to him and I'm giving him a push. If Stephen did nothing physically, but he said inside himself, I'm strong, I'm solid, I'm grounded. I'm strong, I'm solid, and grounded. And I came back and attempted to push Stephen, I wouldn't be able to take him off balance anywhere near as easily because he's given himself a different message. Another thing is to visualize yourself being strong. What I would visualize is I visualize an oak tree. Oak tree is a pretty good example of something that's solid and strong, right? Body, those qualities. And what I'm saying right now, we all need to find that steady ground. And there are many different practices that we can engage in. And that's really what I want us to explore together, is how can we do this? So thinking about your own life, when things started to become unstable, that there was literally an emotional or mental earthquake going on, the ground is shaking and opening up. What would you have, what have you done in the past that has worked for you that helped you to find even a small moment of calm or control, where you found yourself initially being shaken by the turbulence and you were able to do something to bring you into that moment of calm and control? So I've got Julia's got a hand up, Tina, and anyone else that wants to share. Who would like to share some examples of what you have done to find those moments of calm or control? If you've got an example, just feel free to jump in. Yeah, go for it, Stephen.
Okay, yeah, I like. I think it's. Is it Stephen Murphy who did the 7 Habits of Effective People? The circle of concern and the circle of influence. We have lots of things in our circle of concern, but if we have a smaller circle there with things we can actually do something about, putting your attention, your effort on those things is more effective than worrying about everything. The other thing I use comes from DBT therapy, which are the 4 ways to solve any problem, which is you can fix it, solve it, what we all want to do. You can look at it from different perspectives, which can make it seem easier. Or the other thing is you can accept when you can't change something and only give it the energy it needs, i.e. the circle of concern, circle of influence. And that is to radically accept when you don't have the resources to change something. Of course, the 4th thing you can do is just do nothing and stay miserable, which is supposed to be provocative, I think.
Then, yeah, and absolutely, Stephen. It's interesting as you're speaking. A thought comes to mind. I'm going to quote Gabor Mate here, and you know, we all want to feel better when we're feeling overwhelmed, we're feeling frustrated, we're feeling sad, angry, upset. How many agree you want to feel better when you're experiencing what we would describe as undesirable emotions? You want to do something to make yourself feel better. And what are people's go-to strategies to make themselves feel better? You might have some of you that will go and meditate and go for a walk, but generally speaking, in modern society, what are the kind of quick fix solutions that people self-medicate with? I'm feeling miserable. What might I do? Go for it, Tamara.
Food.
I would say for me, and we're speaking about prayer works every time. That's my medication, a form of medication. Yeah, prayer, and everyone has their own, you know, spiritual journeys or whatever the case may be. But for me, I know that if I'm in uproar or if I need to feel better or obtain clarity, then prayer is the best option for me. It gives me calmness, clarity, and then helps me make the next decision that I'm going to make a lot clearer than I was before.
Absolutely. You know, having some kind of spiritual practice is beautiful. I wish that was the case, but for the vast majority of people, what are they doing? They're turning to substances. What kind of substances? What's the most commonly used psychoactive drug on the planet? Does anyone know?
Drug I would say there's 3 to me. Alcohol is one, then they have marijuana and, you know, all the other, that's what's legal now. So yeah, it's some type of drug or an alcohol that's utilized for calming. Xanax,
Sugar.
Well, the most commonly utilized psychoactive drug on planet Earth today is available everywhere, and many of us feed it to our children. It is sugar.
Sugar.
And when I call sugar a psychoactive drug, some people get really triggered. Look up the meaning of a psychoactive drug, something that changes your brain chemistry. Sugar changes your brain chemistry, so it is classified as a psychoactive drug. How many of you have ever reached for sugar when you are stressed? I've heard so many people say, I'm so stressed, I need some chocolate. I see Kate's hand went straight up. Yeah, of course. Many of us have been there, right? It's something that we do. So, and it's socially acceptable. You can get it anywhere, in any corner shop, petrol station, gas station for our colleagues in America, vending machines. Sugar, caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, junk food. Now we've also got a lot of people that will doom scroll on social media to escape, right? Again, I'm not going to ask for show of hands. You know if you've done it. I have done it. There's times where it's like I can't deal with the world around me, so I'm trying to escape. You're binging on a box set and hiding from facing your stuff. These are the kind of things people do. So rather than being present and facing, we're trying to escape. Whether that's escaping through a substance or a distraction or whatever. And part of this is if we want to find the steady ground, we have to be present to what is. Does that make sense? Mindfulness quite literally means being present to the reality of this moment as it is, not as we want it to be. You feel unsettled because reality is not as you want it to be. But actually, the people that are best equipped to navigate is they can stand in the eye of the storm and find peace. And whether that is, the Nelson Mandelas, the Mahatma Gandhis types of the world, people that are facing really challenging situations, are able to find that peace. And that's really what I'm going to encourage us to explore. And what are some examples of what we would call grounding practices? At least shorten it to grounders. I think grounding practice is probably going to be a way you'll remember it all, because grounders reminds me of rounders, which I always used to play at school. But whichever works for you, grounders, grounding practices. As Tamara said, it could be a spiritual practice. It could be prayer, meditation, something that allows you to connect to something beyond yourself. Now, please remember, spirituality is nothing to do with religion. Religion could be a spiritual practice, but so could being in nature. Myself and my partner have recently discovered forest bathing. That for me is a spiritual practice. I am being present and mindful in nature, and find that actually there's research now, clinically reviewed research, that suggests 15 to 20 minutes of being fully present in nature, no technology, is enough to totally reset your nervous system. Does that make sense? For me, that's a spiritual practice. I'm connecting to something beyond myself, the nature of my environment. It could be yoga, whatever it is, but some way that you can adopt some kind of spiritual practice that allows you to be present to the reality of this moment. It could be hobbies that we use as distraction. So rather than turning to the screens and the video games or whatever, what about taking up some kind of creative practice, writing some music, learning to play an instrument, learning a language, whatever it is, something that allows you to express your creativity. Journaling, when you're overwhelmed by thoughts in your mind, what about getting them out and putting them on a piece of paper? Social connection. There is a direct correlation between the degradation of community in Western society and the increase in mental health issues and suicidality. I will say that again so we are all very clear. There is a direct correlation from the 1960s onwards in the degradation of community and the increase in mental health issues and suicidality. If you live in Western society, you might not remember a time when we had a sense of community. If you're interested in learning more about this, I'm going to encourage you to watch a show on Netflix called Blue Zones. It's based on research that was done over the last 30 years. Blue zones are, there's 5 left in the world. There are areas in the world where people typically live to more than 100 years of age. I'm not talking about the average 1 or 2. I'm talking about, on average, most people live to 100 years of age. But they're not just living longer, better quality life, more vitality, more energy. They're more functional at the latter years of their life than most of us are in our 60s and 70s. How do they do that? There's 5 pillars. We don't have time to cover them all today. But what is one of those foundational pillars that ensures longevity, ensures good quality of life, ensures minimal instances of mental health issues and suicidality?
Community.
The clue was in the framing of the statement. Yeah, go for it.
Community.
It is absolutely community. We need community to flourish. We are literally chimps that dropped our fur. And there's another documentary on Netflix about, I think it's called Chimp Nation or something like that. If you really want to understand primal human behaviors, watch a show about chimps. You're like, actually, we're not that different. But why they survive, why those chimp communities flourish is because they worked as a unit. Most of us feel totally isolated. And it's very difficult to be resilient and robust when you're trying to deal with all of the challenges in your life by yourself. How many would agree with that? So absolutely, community is another one. How can you find and build a community around you? Julie, you're right. Actually, they say it's worse. They say that loneliness is the, sorry, I thought you said smoking cigarettes. Loneliness is the equivalent of smoking a packet of cigarettes every day in terms of the impact it has on your health and longevity. I'm not just talking about how you feel, physical health. It leaves you more prone to things like metabolic disease, heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, stroke. Being outside, already talked about the Japanese practice of forest bathing. It's not woo-woo, it's not some hippie practice. It's actually now got a lot of data and science behind it. So actually just get out, be in nature, leave your phone and your devices behind. 20 minutes a day is all it takes to totally reset your nervous system. Having time with the people you care about, not looking at screens, but actually having a meal where you sit down and have conversations with people and just being able to stop and be present. And for me, one of the most powerful grounding practices I learned is quite literally the simplest thing you can do. Another practice that sounds very hippie when you tell people, actually got a huge amount of research behind it. And it's literally the practice of barefoot grounding. How many of you have heard the practice of barefoot grounding, of standing barefoot on the earth for 10 minutes a day? Okay, some of you. Why would that be important? Why is that something that we suffer from as modern humans that previous incarnations of humans didn't have to worry about because they spent time barefoot? Why do we need to be standing barefoot on the earth? We could go into a whole conversation about shoes, but what is the benefit of barefoot grounding? And there is a movie on YouTube which has explored the research behind this. There are hospitals in America and Canada that have got grounding beds where the bed sheets are literally plugged into the earth pin and literally connected to the ground. So whilst you're lying on those bed sheets, you are connected to the earth. You can spend money buying all these devices or barefoot shoes that have got copper pads in them that you connect to the earth, or you can spend no money and just stand barefoot on a patch of earth. And for those of you saying connect with nature, all of these things are true, but Julie, you're right. It's an electrical exchange. When we are stressed, we build up positive ions in our system, and you need an outlet for it, right? You get overcharged. And how many of you would agree that when you're stressed, you feel overcharged, overwhelmed, like your brain, your circuits are fried? When you stand barefoot on the ground, there's an ion exchange. The ground is putting in negative ions and taking away the positive ions. And that's why even 10 minutes of barefoot on the earth, the electrical exchange that occurs allows you to discharge. Does that make sense? Most of us never discharge because you walk around all day with shoes on, which often have rubber soles, right? What does rubber do? It blocks electricity, right? It's not a conductor of electricity. Then you come home and you put your slippers on. Again, rubber soles. Most of us, unless you're off on holiday once or twice a year, you stand on the beach, you may never get opportunity to stand literally barefoot on the earth. So, yeah, thank you, Patricia. Instant uplift, and that's not just a hippie woo-woo notion. There's a direct physiological benefit because of the electrical exchange that occurs. Now, I could go on.
Can you give an example of that just happened?
Please, go for it. Please share.
Yeah, I do grounding. I have the expensive grounding sheet on my bed. I've had that nearly 2 years, but my daughter wasn't really believing in it, but she suffers from anxiety. Hence, that is why I am on this. Not something I suffer from myself, but I was looking for tips for my daughter. But anyway, yeah, I also have a grounding pillow. So her anxiety's been high of late because of the synagogue attack in Manchester, which is where we live. And she's a primary school teacher. And she's been really struggling and getting upset and struggling to sleep. And so I just gave her the grounding pillow. I said, just have that, touch that, see how you feel in the morning. Yesterday morning, after using the grounding pillow, she said, I don't feel anxious. I feel fine. Do you know what I mean? So she found it really, really helped, and she was really surprised. Now, it might not all have been about the grounding pillow, but it was a definite difference. You could see it. You could see the difference in her from using the grounding pillow from the day before. This is an example.
Amazing. Thank you, Jennifer. And that for me is exactly what we're talking about here. When there is a crisis, it feels like the ground has been pulled from underneath you. Does that make sense? Our ability to find our ground again gives us our strength back. And Jennifer's example is a perfect one of her daughter being able to find her ground. As I said, like, yes, there are many devices you can buy now. Simple search online, you'll find pillows and shoes and sheets and all those kind of things. But you don't need to spend any money because nature gave you the solution from day one, which is just stand barefoot on a patch of earth. Find a bit of dirt or some grass, 10 minutes a day, and that's all you need. So money isn't even an object to this. It's our ability to find the time that's the most important thing. Remember, change doesn't mean fixing everything. It doesn't mean that we have to show up and change the world around us, but it means that we can show up differently, grounded, compassionately, with empathy, with what we would call unconditional positive regard, love, compassion, empathy. Unafraid to speak, but we're expressing our truth in a way that is working towards positive outcomes for everybody. So what is one thing that you could do based on our conversations today to be able to find the ground underneath you, even when the world feels rocky? So who'd like to share? Julie, I love your example there. If you need someone to carry your bags on your way to the Cayman Islands, absolutely. But you know, if you could get to the Cayman Islands or somewhere tropical, amazing. But what about what you could do today? What could you do today before the day is finished to be able to take a moment to find your ground again? I'd like to share. Anyone taking anything from this session that you're willing to do? Julie's literally taking shoes and socks off right now to get out on ground. Amazing, love that. Catherine, there are many different sort of products around there with regards to grounding sheets. A simple search online, you'll find something. We're not here to recommend any specific product, but I would encourage you to do some research and find the one that's right for you. There are shoes, again, that have copper patches on them, so when you walk on the earth, that you are creating a direct connection if you don't feel comfortable walking barefoot. Amazing. Some of you are going to be taking up your Tai Chi practice, cuddling your dog, again, beautiful grounding practice, walk in nature, amazing. So here's the thing, that you know, taking action and getting trained are two things that allow you to respond more effectively. Like the examples that we've already had, we can show up and react in a way where we're not going into crisis because we've got the tools and the skills. To support you, that we do have a program called the Mental Health Champions Program, something we've been running for many years now. We've got literally thousands of champions trained from around the world. In fact, there's probably some of our champions here in the call. If you are one of our champions, please drop a message in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And it's very much about being able to respond in a time of crisis to those around you. If you want to be one of those people that knows how to show up and support those around you, we've got a program. It's 10 hours of training in 4 2.5-hour sessions. It's completely online, so you can go from anywhere. Because you've attended our webinar, there's a 50% discount. It's normally just under £500, but you can join for less than £250 by using the code that we can send you. So if you're interested in that, please drop us an email. Lee's going to put the email address to reach out to us in the chat. Our next session is going to be talking about brave enough to talk, because strength starts with honesty. It's honoring Men's Mental Health Month. what we find in pretty much all of our work, that usually, regardless of what specific angle of mental health we're talking about, we have predominantly female audiences. Men really struggle to open up and talk. And it's great that there's been many of you, and Derek, Stephen, for your contributions. But how many would agree that men do find it harder to open up and talk? The session isn't just for men, but it's encouraging people to step up and to talk and share, because that's what true leadership is. Admitting vulnerability and times of struggle is not a weakness, it's a strength. It takes a stronger person to put their hand up and say, you know what, I'm struggling and I could use some help. For me, it's actually a sign of weakness to mask it and pretend like everything's okay. And what we need to do is celebrate people that show vulnerability as a strength. That's what we're going to be exploring, because we have a huge issue with this around the world. You know, something like 3 out of 4 attempts on suicide that lead to death are men. And it's really scary that this is happening. So we need to take action, and we can't wait for people in positions of political authority to do this. This is up to us as a community, as a society, to start reaching out to the vulnerable people in our communities. That's what we're going to be exploring next month. So please sign up for that. Share that with anyone that might be interested. We have so many free resources on our website as well. Lee will put the link into the chat. You can download all of our resources. They're all free of charge. If you are here, you work for a company, you're interested in what you can bring into your workplace, we do have a separate forum about workplace issues. Again, we will send you the link for that so you can join up for our People, Culture, Wellbeing Forum. And we've got a weekly newsletter. Most of you have probably found us through the newsletter. If you don't get it, sign up, because we send lots and lots of really useful information every couple of weeks, and you'll be the first ones to hear about any of our events. And we do have our online training as well. We'll send information on this. There is a code to get a 50% discount if you want to try and sign up for some of our training programs. If you enjoyed today's session, leave us a review. It really helps us, because it helps more people to find us. So there'll be a link for Google that will come into the chat and into your inbox very soon. Let us know what you thought. Again, any more support you need for your company, like reviewing your EAP, we're happy to do that free of charge. So get in touch. And if you are struggling and you need access to support immediately, there's some telephone numbers there on screen, particularly Samaritans, and resources from the US, Australia, New Zealand, and various parts of the world. But also explore, if you are in a workplace, does your workplace have resources that could support you as well? Okay. I had a huge subject, a tiny amount of time. So with Lee's support, we've done our best to navigate this conversation. I'm really grateful there were so many of you here today. Before we finish, what final questions, comments, feedback, what do you want to discuss and share before we close this call? And I'm happy to hang out for the next few minutes. I appreciate some of you may need to leave, but if there's anything you'd like to discuss, Lee and myself are happy to stay on for a few minutes. So what would you like to ask, discuss, or share before we finish?
Neil, can
Go for it, Ashok.
exactly.
Sorry, say that again, Ashok.
Can you share something about the Stress Management Society, what you do exactly, where you're located?
Yeah, we're in the UK, in London, and we exist to raise awareness and support people who want to better understand the impact of stress and poor mental health issues. So we provide resources, advice, guidance, and we also do annual campaigns like Stress Awareness Month, which is April every year.
One of the requirements for our contractors or for our employees to do the psychological stress assessment for each employee. Would you undertake such work?
Absolutely, yeah. That's very much part of what we do from our consultancy arm. Where are you based?
I'm based in Kuwait.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. We do a lot of work in the Middle East. Lee, if you could get Ashok's details, maybe send him a private message. We'll send you an email address, Ashok. If you reach out, we'll organize a call.
Certainly, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing. Anyone else got anything you'd like to share, discuss, ask, explore before we close our call?
Just, if I'm all right, just to speak for a second.
Yeah, of course, please.
Just when you're talking about, especially like men don't like to speak out, I don't know what you can do to break down the barriers. Just around the fact whether you're male or female is irrelevant, but the fact that if you do bring up any kind of struggling with mental health, majority of people around you do not know how to react to that. They sort of freeze within themselves. And so even for most people's experience, if they have spoke up about it, it's not that they're getting a negative reaction to it, more like a numb reaction to it. And so it's like, well, I spoke about it and I've got nothing back in return. Do you know what I mean? Or all I've done is I've made somebody else feel awkward. And so it's just, you know, how do you pass on the message? And I'm not saying that I have got any skills in this department, but how do you get the message out there and the training out there just to us as a species of, well, this is what, you know, your fellow human being needs in the moments. It's not for you to freeze and change the subject or to say, well, go and have a cup of tea, everything will be okay.
And Jennifer, you're right. Like, there are some basic core human skills that we need to be teaching children at a young age. You know, we learn so much at school, most of which we forget 3 months after we leave school, but core skills like how to manage finance and have a positive relationship with money, and how to, you know, recognize kind of mental health and be able to those life skills that are going to equip you to be able to cope with all the challenges we face in life are something that we need to be instilling into children at a young age. And I think for me, that's kind of the long-term solution, which, you know, I wish I got to contribute to those kind of decisions. Sadly, I don't, but we can encourage as many of us as possible to start addressing this as early as possible, particularly as now we've arrived at a point. One of the main causes of death for young people is suicide. It's really scary to think that that you've got young children as young as 8 and 9 that are taking their own lives because we're not equipping them to cope with the challenges of the modern world. So that's part of it, but also what you're doing now, turning up for us, 100 and whatever of us that were here today having these conversations, the more we have these conversations, the more they become normalized. And part of the challenge is because we don't have these conversations, when they come up, we don't know what to do. But if we're having these kind of conversations regularly, then when it comes up, it's like, oh, okay, I kind of know how to approach this. I know how to respond. Even if that's, I'm just going to listen and give you a shoulder and an ear. So part of this is how do we destigmatize this subject, remove the guilt and the shame by making it more normal? Because we all experience challenges with our mental health. It's it's an ongoing thing that we're all going to experience. Some days you have good mental health, some days you don't. But we just don't have the spaces to explore this, which is why we're still maintaining the stigma around the subject, which by now, 2025, I would hope that we'd have been able to move beyond that and for it not to be seen as a weakness or a vulnerability. That's something, as I said, like I wish I had that this is the solution. I've got some ideas, but also it's not something 1 or 2 people can do. It's not like someone can make a decision. We all need to collectively make a commitment to improving things. I don't know if that helps, Jennifer, and I might not give you a direct answer, but does that help in any way?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I didn't know if you had anything that was going on in the pipeline. This is the first time I've come across your charity company, however you describe it. So yeah, like I say, it's just thinking on the ground immediately. That's that I see that as the blockage really. That even if people do open up, the person that they're speaking to, it's not that it's a taboo subject. It's just that I think because of the way society's gone, that it's a skill set that we've lost. To be able to, and for a lot of people, they don't know for themselves. They might not recognize that Absolutely. The way they ground themselves or re-ground themselves is to take the dog for a walk or is to ring up and speak to a family member. So then they don't necessarily know that that's the way they could offer advice to the person speaking to them when they're in crisis. So I do think that it's a skill that we've sort of lost as a species because of the direction that we've taken. And I'll just say, well, I'm on. I was really happy to hear you talk about sugar because I volunteer for a charity that's all about trying to get rid of sugar in ultra-processed foods and how that affects mental health, and the stuff about grounding. So yeah, I was very impressed. Thank you for putting this on.
You're welcome, and thank you for joining. Much appreciated. Wonderful. Any final questions, comments, feedback before we close? We've got a couple more minutes left if anyone's got anything to share. Okay. Still got a few people's hands up. Tina, Stephen, if you did have something to share, feel free to do so.
Yes, certainly. I thoroughly agree with what you've just said about, how to get the word out there, and reducing stigma, particularly within yourself, and open up the conversation. But I think more, practical ways of doing that is to, Google mental health awareness training. There are the more established ones like Mental Health First Aid England, which is expensive, although a lot of companies are open to paying for that, for their employees to become mental health champions and the person to go to in the company. But even if you don't want to go to that expense, there are online education forums, such as Udemy, do a very basic course of mental health awareness. It can be as little as 20 quid. But yeah, get knowledgeable about mental health and, signposting to ethical websites on particular subjects such as eating disorders and depression, anxiety, your own stress, and signposting to something as simple as the GP. Your local GP is someone you can talk to about your mental health. It's free of charge. So just knowing that is a step forward.
And thank you, Stephen. And we will be sharing information because we do have our online training program. If you liked what you heard today, we've got an online version of it, and it starts from £5. So money's not the barrier. It's literally £5 to do the course. We have many. There's one on resilience. There's one on mental health awareness. There's one for line managers. So we do have that, and also our Mental Health Champions program is a very different approach to mental health first aid. It's more practical skills on how to have those conversations, very much what Jennifer was alluding to. And that's our landmark program. We're delivering that around the world for companies like Philips and Mars and various other sort of large multinational organizations. So we've got kind of quite a robust program there, which again, if any of you are interested, you're welcome to join us. The next dates are at the end of October. There's 4 sessions there. So if anyone would like to find out more about, to Stephen's point about how you can do like more in-depth training or just do some self-awareness training, reach out. We're more than happy to help, and we will share an email tomorrow with more details of all the different things that we have available. Wonderful. So thank you all so much for joining. These sessions would be very quiet if it was just me and Lee. So we really appreciate that. We always get hundreds of people that show up, and it's really amazing for me to know that we've got people from around the world joining us to have these discussions every month. We look forward to seeing you next month. In the meantime, anything you need, feel free to reach out, and enjoy the rest of your day and find that moment of grounded presence. Go out there if you can, stand barefoot on the earth, and no matter what happens in your life, know that the ground is always underneath you. All right. Much love, everybody. Have a beautiful afternoon, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.